Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our first captivating conversation of 2021. This lecture series, as part of the mission of the Idaho State Historical Society, is designed to feature a variety of guest speakers and topics, ranging from the history of the Idaho State Penitentiary to the issues facing correctional institutions today. My name is Anthony Perry. I'm an interpretive specialist for the Idaho State Historical Society, and today's guest is Mark Renick. Mark is the program manager for reentry services at St. Vincent de Paul in Southwest Idaho. Welcome, Mark. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. Like I said, I always envisioned when we did this, it would be in one of those situation rooms in your location there where people could sit and we could share ideas. So
Right.
It's a little bit different, but we'll do what we can.
Yeah. I mean, I try to keep the ambiance. I am at the old pen right now speaking to you. You're at your home office right now?
I'm actually at my home office, so I'm probably a little bit more comfortable, but that's okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you about, so your St. Vincent de Paul office just moved to Overland Road. How's that move going?
Actually, we're in the process of completing it. I had been sick, and so my piece of the move kind of got delayed, but we're pretty much set up and ready to go now at 3217 West Overland Road. And that's where, if people know St. Vincent de Paul, that's the old food pantry. It actually was the old administration building for St. Vincent de Paul. And what happened there was there were so many people working out of that little building that an opportunity came along with, ironically, somebody donated a tremendous amount of office furniture. And when the furniture was there, they started looking for a location. And so they took the administration and moved them over off Fairview now. I think it's 5652 Fairview. And then what we did was take the reentry staff and then divide them in half. What we've done historically with the reentry staff is to kind of be that first day out situation. So people would come into the office and they seemed like they would get bombarded with all the different programs that were available. And we had the sense, at least I had the sense over time, that they'd walk out being so overwhelmed with information that they probably retain nothing of it. So what this is going to allow us to do is the 3217 Overland Road, we will only utilize for the first day out situations. So people just out of incarceration, we would encourage them to come there first. We can give them certainly a voucher for some clothing immediately. We can give them a real strong link in terms of food, because there's the pantry is right next to us. So we can set them up with 3 days worth of food. And then we can give them a few of the programs that we're excited about, that we're working on in the new year, and we're going to continue to work on. And then we'll let them go throughout their day. And then importantly, kind of follow up on those things as they're comfortable doing it. I would contend that most people that come into the office, and we do pick a lot of people up if you need a ride. So if those of you who have friends or have potential out there in the desert and those people don't have a ride, a case manager just needs to send me an email, and then I or one of my staff will pick them up and then we'll bring them to the office and we'll take care of those things.
Yeah, that's a great service.
So, and I think too, and we are really the only agency that focuses totally on people getting out of incarceration. And it's all done privately with money. And for the most part, everybody who's on my staff has been incarcerated. I've been incarcerated and the rest of the people have. So it becomes a real strong, a warm handoff, if you will. They walk into my office and they'll see memorabilia from prisons and stuff and pictures of people from prisons. And they'll should feel a little bit more comfortable. And so our staff will kind of give them a little bit of an overview, and then we'll kind of push them on down the road to the next things that they're going to do. It's a process that, in retrospect, we probably should have done before. Some of you know that we were over on Emerald and Benjamin for almost 2 years, and we were very happy there. But when it came time to renew the lease was expensive. And one of the strongest pieces of that location for us was the fact that we were really right next to an innovative program through the Department of Corrections. And increasingly, the money for that program will fade out in September. So I certainly didn't want to sign a lease and be a place without them next door. Now, they may go on and survive, legislatures can do anything they want to do, but it looked like they're not going to be there. So it seemed like the opportune time to move. And so we're doing that, which is a pain, but is something we're working through.
And you kind of, to go back, you've had your own experience, serving time in Idaho Department of Corrections, and you were released. Did you have programs that you were offered that, were available to you?
Well, what we've done, it's kind of interesting. I'll kind of highlight some of the stuff that we do. But yes, I was incarcerated. People give me grief, but I openly tell you my IDOC number, it's 74975. And I've been out of prison for almost 10 years now. And when I was released, there really weren't a lot of programs available for people just right out of incarceration. A friend had to pick you up, a lover or family member picked you up, and then you just tried to make your way through the system. So of the things that we do now, I'll highlight and then I'll kind of get to how we kind of develop those. But we do have that first day out situation that I want to make sure everybody comes. We'd love for everybody to be there. And then if you do need the ride, we'll actually be there to come out and pick you up and give you that ride. Within my staff now too, I have two staff dedicated to employment. One is that traditional kind of quick get the job employment situation that you might need. One is a more extensive kind of living wage kind of program that allows you to take a few steps to get a more sophisticated job. So I have two people that are dedicated only to helping people who are coming out of incarceration through through employment. We've also got a program that we're excited about since I've seen you last, Anthony, which is we call Recon. So many people come out of incarceration lost in many different ways. And if they've had an issue with addiction in any way, shape, or form, opiate stimulants, or even alcohol now, you can look at the program we call Recon. And that program offers you a recovery coach that'll go forward with you in a walk for 6 months. It's a really innovative program. Some people who may or may not know what a recovery coach is. A recovery coach is really in between a mentor and a sponsor. It's not meant to sponsor and tell you exactly what to do. It's not meant to mentor and tell you exactly what to do. It's a real life experienced person who's gone through this themselves. And so they become that resource. And in this program, they'll have access to that person for 6 months. And let's say that they're 4 months, 2 months into it, and they need an extra set of clothes for a new job. There'll be resources available through that program to help pay for that. So it becomes a real kind of supportive process with a recovery coach in charge of those things. Recovery coaches are actually now licensed by the state of Idaho. It's a credentialed license. You can become a recovery coach, and you're seeing more and more of those. So that's one of the programs certainly that we're very, very excited about. Again, there's the old COVID stuff. In addition to that, we're actually now working on what we're going to call a 72-hour transitional program, so that as people want to become more involved in changing their life, there'll be the resources of Vincent de Paul and the volunteers that can actually walk them through that program, kind of based on a national model that we developed a couple of years ago. And we're gonna bring that back. We're in the process of bringing that back, and we're excited about those aspects. The one thing too that my office has that no other location has is that I can refer you out of my office to what St. Vincent de Paul calls a conference for support, and I have 2 reentry conferences. There's one in Canyon County and there's one in Ada County. And those entities were designed to help people within their first 90 days of incarceration. So I can refer you to those conferences, and then somebody will follow up with you and help you with things like transportation, bus passes, some help on rent. And that I can do out of this office and kind of as we go forward. Also, I think since you and I've talked at length, we now really have made the commitment to expand into Canyon County full time. We'd always done it peripherally, but now we're going to offer the same services on Overland out of the location in Canyon County. That's the thrift store that's on Cleveland Boulevard. So that will be happening within the next 30 days too. So those are kind of the exciting things that are happening. And that's why when you and I have been talking all along, we've talked about different organizations that formed this coalition, and it was just important to come now under the auspices of St. Vincent de Paul, Southwest Idaho, for that credibility and to make it cleaner. So that's kind of where we are.
Yeah. When I first spoke to you, you were leading IMSI Hope Phase 2. Has that kind of evolved to kind of absorb into
Well, the
St.
thing
Vincent
that
de
is,
Paul's
yeah, it's a
program?
part of, I'm going to call that on our webpage, I'd call that part of our, the coalition that makes it work. Does that entity still exist? Yes, it does. And there are some aspects where I'll wear that hat, but for the most part, the important piece is to come under the auspices of St. Vincent de Paul, because I got more credibility and a way to link with that. But third, IMSI Community Phase 2 is still in existence. There's another strong organization called Serving USA, which funds us. There's another strong organization called Just Leadership USA, which is a national organization that funds us. And in addition to that, there's one called Recovery Idaho, which is a funding vehicle for the state, which actually funds that recon program. And so it's a real strong coalition, but too often what we found, Anthony, is try to explain, hey, who do you work for? And people get confused, and it's just, you get muddled in it. By and large, they know the name and they know that we're there to help them. And so it's much cleaner if we just bring it under the auspices of St.
Yeah. Do you have, you've been doing this for a while, do you have an idea of like the success rate of folks that do go through your program and
We've
don't
really,
try to just go it alone?
yeah, I think it's difficult to go it alone and make it success rate. People love the different recidivism. There's so many different definitions for recidivism. We do chart people who come into the office, and we keep track of the people who come into the office. We've been working on that actively now for the past couple of years. We hope that data will come through and be successful in terms of numbers. But success, quote unquote, has really become something that's of a personal nature. So the key for me is to keep at least my staff and us focused on the fact that Anthony comes into my office today and he doesn't necessarily know what he's after or what he's looking for. And my job is to listen to what you say, try to give you those immediate sorts of things, and then provide those a potential resource for you down the line as you want to change your life. Because the key is really to change your life. It's not necessarily to give you rent or to give you a bus pass or get you a job, the greatest job in the world. The key is really to change your life. And changing your life is not an easy process. So what we try to do is to admit that, listen to it, and then focus on what you're going to want to address to make that work, and show you, hopefully, that there are programs that'll dramatically help you do that.
Do you think that having a faith-based program, having something through St. Vincent de Paul, how does that compare to a more secular program? Like what options are available for, folks who aren't interested in working with a religious faith?
I think some people are, I've kind of gone back and forth on this, and I used to hedge a little bit, to be honest with you. But obviously St. Vincent de Paul is a faith-based organization. IMSI is a faith-based organization. And the majority of people who do fund me are faith-based organizations. You come into my office and you know exactly what you do, and you've been to a 12-step group and you want to go to a 12-step group, you're going to go work and you're going to make it work, then we're going to be supportive of you and direct you to those locations. My sense is that that's not going to work for you. Life on parole and returning back to community is very difficult work. It's heavy lifting, if you will. And if you're going to do that, I think that the stronger, the quicker you can link to a body of faith that can help you with that, the better off you're going to be. Without exception, I think that's the case. We've seen tremendous amounts of success stories in terms of how people have turned stuff around. And we also see people who, for 3 or 4 times, coming back and forth, saying, this time I got it, this time I got it. But if you don't make that change of heart, you're really going to have a hard time succeeding. I will tell you that the only reason I'm sitting here talking to you tonight is that what I went through in prison, and that I made a relationship with Jesus Christ. And that's why I am where I am here today. And I would contend that's why we're successful. I wouldn't beat you over the head with that. But I would say this is the way I had it. If you asked that question, I would still be responsive. I'd help you and I'd show you where the different directions are. And I would make it really clear that when you got jammed up, come back and see me.
Interesting. Yeah.
I mean, like you and I you can think of one gentleman who's on our videos who he was a character, and we had fun doing all that kind of stuff. He's on your video, he's on my videos too. And he had trouble, and he just could not make that transition. And he was tied up in what had happened to him before, and this and this and this, and he couldn't let that go, and he couldn't focus in on going forward and changing his life. And now he's back in there for a period of time now. At some point,
And just so listeners know, if you have any questions, feel free to click down on the Q&A, and we should be prompted to those. So, but referring to this,
I actually feed better off questions than I do to speak. So.
Referring to this gentleman that we were just talking about, he was actually incarcerated here back in 1969. He was released in April of 2018. He's one of the longest serving prisoners in Idaho history. And, you know, what being in prison, you know, institutionalized, that word. Do you think that there are resources available for folks who have been incarcerated for that long, for that much of their life?
I don't know. He's an example. I can say 5 or 6 other people who I do not understand why you get right out. You say, Mark, I'm going to change, Mark, I'm going to change, and you go right back. I think there might be a comfort zone for some people, and that might be the case with this gentleman. But I know that he got so wrapped up in what was supposed to happen and what had happened to him, and it got to where it ate him up. It made it difficult for him to work. And so if he's not going to work and he's just really going to go around and complain, nothing positive is going to happen. Everything about success on parole involves the people you associate with. So if you hang around people who are positive and who are good role models and who challenge you in any way, job-wise, spiritually wise, your life's going to change because you're going to listen to that. If you tend to hang around people who you've known before, who borderline or doing drugs, you're going to end up right back in the situation. I always use the analogy of like playing tennis. You don't want to play tennis with somebody that doesn't know how to play tennis. You want to play tennis with somebody that's an expert in tennis so that you can become a better tennis player. It's the exact same concept, I think, in life, that I personally try to hang around the people in my standpoint who challenge me to the point of my daily walk and what I daily do, and help with some of the technology that I need to make my job work. So I tend to hang around people who can help do the things that I do in a positive manner. If somebody's all upset, down, and having problems, then even though you're my good friend, it's not going to be me calling you for coffee. I mean, when you call me, we'll come in and we'll talk, but I'm not going to go out of my way to put myself at risk, if you will, to do that.
Yeah, kind of along those same lines, you're dealing with the individual. Do you have any resources for the families of the individuals?
You'd be surprised how much of my week is dealing with families of someone who's about to get out, who's about to do this, who's about to do that. That is surprisingly more of my time is spent. And it's like, my son's just the greatest guy in the world. And boy, he just did this, this, and this. And it's really an education of them to say, he's 25 years old. Let's start letting him make these kinds of decisions. And why don't you back away and understand that he is your little boy, but he's got to dig himself out of this hole. Because once he digs himself out of that hole and he's successful at it, it's going to change the way he looks at absolutely everything. If you help him now, or if you help them now, or if you save that husband now, you're going to be in a situation where they're going to rely on you to do that too. Are there programs out there now? There are counseling programs out there now. We would love to develop something like that, but you have a tendency when people, let's say in that situation, get together, all they talk about is this particular situation, their particular situation, and they tend not to focus on the overall effect. There's a group called ALO, A-L-O, and if you look it up online or on Facebook, it's designed for people who have loved ones who are incarcerated and are going through the process. and they kind of get together once a month and they share stories and they support each other. But for the most part, those guys, when you go to those meetings, they're talking about a specific person in their life and they're looking for some support, but it's always about, he just did this, he just did this, she just did this, she just did this, when in reality, the people who they're talking about need to recognize what they've done, stand up and start to address what they're doing.
Yeah, that's great. And kind of along those lines, one of our participants actually asked the question, what do you do with someone who is released and is open in saying that he has no interest in changing?
Well, I'm not in a spot to judge. So you're in front of me and you say, hey, look, you're supposed to give me clothes and you're going to give me some food and you're going to be a ride over P&P. And I've got money buried in the backyard of my house and I'm going to be cool. Then I'm going to say, good luck with that, man. I sure hope that works out. But I will say, these are the things I would talk about. And as you get jammed up or as you see some of those likelihoods not come to fruition, then come back and talk to me. I've always kind of joked the fact that I was in prison, it was like everybody had money buried in the backyard and they were driving Cadillacs and everything was gravy on the outside. And then I'm out and I'm seeing them in the same food banks I'm in. I'm thinking, where was the money in the backyard? So it's pretty much somebody who will come across that aggressive with that attitude has a tendency to be afraid of what to face to do the changes. Everybody's afraid of changing and in anything in life. And so much less changing your behavior after incarceration, that's exactly the same. So the likelihood that that person's saying that to me, I would be respectful of, but they're afraid of addressing the things inside their heart that needs to be addressed.
Well said, yeah. What is there anything that the Idaho Department of Corrections provides to people being released? Is there like gate money, suit of clothes?
For the most part, there is no gate money unless you've earned it. And they do tend to provide, depending on how much money you've had on your quote unquote books, they'll provide a month's worth of transitional living expenses at a halfway house. And so those things will be decided upon prior to your release with your case manager, and you'll come up with a case plan that allows you to do those things. I will tell you, to the credit, Josh Tuwalt, who is the director of the Department of Corrections now, is going towards a trend where as many people as he can, he wants in what they call CRCs, which are community resource centers. There's one out on Pleasant Valley Road, and there's one over in Nampa. There's a brand new one over in Twin Falls, one in St. Anthony's. People who go to those centers work out in the community and they come back in and they spend the evenings at those facilities. And those guys come out with money and they're coming out and hitting the ground fairly strongly because they're used to working and they're used to getting involved. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of those spots. And I know that the director is working hard for some innovative ways to double that size in those locations. And he should be commended for that. But those people, I tend not to see too much of, because they're out, they've got money, and they're going to go forward. And they're in the community usually every day. So they're doing something. So if those would be probably the strongest aspect of what the department's doing for people now. I know that Tim Lay and the reentry offices within the Department of Corrections are working real hard on internships now that they hadn't before. COVID has put a kind of a whole new click on all this stuff, so that many of the things that, say, somebody even like me as a volunteer could go in and share stuff, it's very, very limited to do. Hopefully some of these restrictions are given a little bit of credence maybe by summer or so that we're able to get out and do more. But for the most part, the Department of Corrections is in a situation where they're attempting just to monitor what they've got, keep everybody as healthy as they can, and then release them to the community.
Yeah. And we were kind of discussing before this that the Idaho Department of Corrections, they just signed a contract with the GEO Group, right, who's also kind of a reentry program. Have you worked with them? Do you look at them as competition, or do you look at them kind of as help, to help keep recidivism down? And
well, I think the GEO Group will be a major force in the state of Idaho. They have a huge contract. Their mandate, according to the RFP, because I wanted that contract and I wasn't able to get it, and they were actually awarded it. Their mandate, if you will, is to be the go-to spot when, say, you and I are on, Anthony's in trouble with his parole agent, and his parole agent's got too much stuff to do and doesn't want to deal with Anthony. And then the agent will say, look, go down and talk to these guys at Geo Group. And so what you will do then is go down to the Geo Group, you'll interview with them. They have some cognitive approaches that they do, and they have some programming that they do, and they will take the quote unquote troubled parole agent from a troubled person on parole away from the PO, so to give them a different chance. The thing that's an issue with Geo Group, and I'm honest with them because I applied for the contract. I also applied for one of the jobs to run the thing just to see if they'd talk to me. The problem with it is that Geo Group is the second largest private prison in the world. And so they really don't highlight that much. But this is an entity that they do in different areas of the state, and they do a lot of it in Texas, they do a lot of it in California. It's a format that works for them. It's very organized, it's very methodical. The thing that my contention is they've hired very good people to do very good jobs at really pretty good, decent wages, but they've brought people in from in-house of Geo Group to run those programs. And so I would contend that to understand what's going on in Idaho, you need to know about Idaho. I will tell you that the statewide director's job I did apply for, and I was one of the 10 finalists. There were 10 finalists. Only 2 of us were from the state of Idaho. And so they ended up hiring a very nice lady from Texas, and she's a nice lady. I think she's going to work hard. But the Geo Group, you're going to hear more and more and more about. And I think you will see that the Department of Corrections will rely on them more and more to handle some of those things that can't get handled. Whereas my choice would have been, if I got in the contract, would have been to make as many of those aspects community oriented. So I would have hired Anthony or somebody that's in the system, that's around the system, that knows Idaho, to help facilitate that change. And they pretty much took their own programming and hired people from within Geo Group. They're very nice people, but you're going to hear a lot about them.
Yeah. I figured. I actually just learned about them because they moved into one of the Idaho State Historical Society buildings.
Yeah, they're in your building. Yeah.
You're
over that nice building down there.
Just down the road from us. So I imagine we might work on some partnerships together as well. And
I think so. You know, I think when I met with her, she was open to people in the community, and she was fantastic in terms of seeking support from me and from other different people. For them to be successful, they have to blend into the community. And they're doing it, from my standpoint, a little bit backwards because, you know, their key staff are not from Idaho. So the lady, I think, who runs the one here in Boise is from California. So that doesn't mean that she's not going to be successful. It doesn't mean that it's not going to happen, but it sure would be a lot easier if she knew who all the players were and she understood all the concepts that would happen specifically to the state of Idaho. And that's the detraction. That's probably why I didn't get the job, but I did get to be one of the finalists and got to talk at length to the people in Florida about it. So.
Now, kind of an interesting question we just received. How do you rate the US prison system as opposed to, say, the UK penal system? I don't know if this is something you would know, but
I know several politicians as well as Department of Corrections officials have gone to Europe and love the Swedish system over there in terms of some of the stuff that's positive. I'm a recovering addict. I know that Spain has done some aggressive things in terms of addressing people who are addicted within the system and done some creative things. You say the U.S. prison system, and to me that's a federal system that's across the state that's really not that in. Doesn't actually even house that many people. I tend to focus on what is in Idaho, and in Idaho, we incarcerate people. And I will tell you that they're down about 1,000 people to their credit, but for the most part, per capita, we incarcerate more people and we're in the top 3 of those states in the nation. So you mess up in Idaho, you go to prison and you tend to stay there. So there's some issues that um, certainly the Department of Corrections could use some insight on. And, when we talk about where we're going with the future, I think that's the aspect. I think the more you and I work together with your history of what's there, and we talk about what's going forward in the future, people like myself and the people who have been in the system need to become advocates and need to become partners in sharing what's happened to them with legislative officials and an ability to make some changes. Because even now in a COVID kind of drained legislative system, there's potentially one bill dealing with the Department of Corrections that could make a little bit of a change, and that hasn't even gotten a number yet. So that's the approach that happens here in Idaho, and that will change when people like myself come forward and go and have coffee with very approachable legislators and say, hey, this is what happened to me. Or a parent of somebody goes and has coffee with somebody and says, hey, this is what happened to me. So that when that budget comes up each year, then the legislator says, I heard about this, something, what did I hear? Maybe I should listen to this. I've been an advocate for the last couple of years in that, much like we did with the Medicaid enhancement, if you recall, we took hearings, like 4 hearings throughout the year where we got feedback on all these kinds of data. I would love to be able to do something like that with the Department of Corrections. During this off season, let's take 4 hearings in which we just let everybody come in and talk about what's happened to them within the Department of Corrections. Because people come to my office and they'll say, I can't believe my son has to pay 75 cents for a top ramen and I can buy him for 10 cents. So that's one issue, but everybody has an issue. And if you gave them that forum, then all those things could be able to be vented, a report could have been written, and then we'd be looking at potentially really making some changes in the Department of Corrections.
Yeah, I feel like, programs like this, we want to highlight and humanize, institutions and the men and women that are incarcerated. So can you talk about your experiences, like things that you remember?
Pretty much anything. I would not want to do it again. I was sentenced to 20 years in prison and needed to do 7 of that before I was released. Fortunate for me, after 7, they did let me go. But it was an eye-opener for me in terms of understanding the life that I had led that was going absolutely nowhere. And so I got to spend some time and to think about that and to make that work. I did that. I was pretty lucky. I was a part of a faith-based program that was at Max. We called it Hope Community, and I was in that program for 3 years. And it was very positive. It changed my life. Volunteers came from all over the Treasure Valley out to talk to us. And Max sounds like a scary place, but to be honest with you, we did the dog program. We trained dogs. We did all the suicide watches. I ended up being the librarian. It was a very positive place for me. And once I got out of incarceration, I went to NNU and started working in social work. And I started trying to thank some of the people who had been positive to me. And that became IMSI Hope Community. And that kind of still exists today. Along the same lines, St. Vincent de Paul came along with these conferences, and I was asked to attend one of those. And over time, those agencies sort of merged in terms of their goals and working together. And so that's why we're here today doing what we're doing.
Yeah, that's great. Someone just asked a really interesting question. With your criminal history, do you find it difficult for potential stakeholders and partners to trust you and work with you?
That's a great question. People almost, if you know me and you go forward, people will critique me for being too honest. The person who pours my coffee in the morning, the barista, knows that I'm a Christian, I've been in prison, and I work with people getting out of incarceration. So the simple answer to that is no. People are they are enthralled by what potentially we can do. And to be honest with you, allowing me to lead an organization like this makes it a little bit easier. It makes it more credible. And it makes funding, to be very honest with you, a little bit easier. You wouldn't think it would, but it does. And so we're approached all the time by what to do and what steps next to do. To be honest with you, one of the hardest pieces I do is to articulate the dream and to make sure that where we're going is the right way to go, to not necessarily follow money, but to follow what can make it work in the long run, and what will make it work for people who followed me out of incarceration. So that's real important. And to be honest with you, money has never been a problem um, for certainly the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. And how can listeners, participants, people watching this, how can they help support these reentry programs so that,
I think the interesting thing is probably if you go to St. Vincent de Paul's website, it's extensive, and a man by the name of Grant Breikenbauer puts this together, and it's really sharp, and it's got all this information in there, and it's www.stvincent.svdpid.org. Everything pretty much is in there. You can click under reentry and you'll see all the programs that I direct for them. There's a resource manual in there for people there. You'll see links to a radio show that I do and I've been doing for 3.5 years at KBXL for addressing the issues of life in living on parole. So we do all those sorts of things, and that would be the best place to go to. It also will ask for people if you're want to volunteer, then link there and we'll set you back up with that. There's always sort of something to do. We're always looking for some to do. And if you're passionate about this, it's very easy to do, just to come forward, tell your story. Or if you're passionate about this and you just want to come pick somebody up, drive out with me and pick somebody up from prison one day and see what it's like when they get in the car after doing 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years, and see that attitude. You'll see how powerful you can change a person's life by simply having the right attitude.
Yeah. That, a participant had just asked this question. In your experience, what's the single best predictor of an individual's success when released? Is it kind of in that first act? Can you kind of just tell right away if they're going to?
I've been doing this for a while, so I kind of can pick it up, to be honest. Discernment is something that, unfortunately, I'm blessed with. But it has to, you look at a person's heart and you see what's in that heart. And if that heart says, I'm afraid I'm going forward and I want to change my life, then those people will be okay. If that heart is cold, if that heart is, I'm going to be a tough guy, I'm not going to let you know what I really feel, I don't know you well enough, so I'm not going to do that. I can make this, I know I can make this. Those people are going to have a harder time surviving doing that and doing it. And they may go back again and come back out again. I mean, I have very good friends who are on the third time in there. They're probably my biggest supporters. They say the best things about me. They'll say, hey, if I'd have listened to this, I would have been okay. So sometimes it takes people a while to figure it out, and that's okay.
Yeah. Your radio show, Victory Over Sin.
Yeah.
You do a lot of interviews with these folks who are just getting out.
I do. Yeah.
What are some takeaways that you've gotten from that?
I got to where I'm kind of like you. I was saying to somebody, I just absolutely love it, because we'll bring somebody in either that's just out or just in, or we've had a couple of legislators on, and we'll be able to talk specifically about what they're doing. They open up, they're candid, and you'll learn more about the Department of Corrections by just going through there and seeing who's been on there before. We've had every director of the Department of Corrections since I've been released has been on there. Some very talented people work for the Department of Corrections, and a lot of them are on there. Bree Derrick, who is the chief of staff for Josh's, should be a show you should listen to. The lady's absolutely brilliant, and she's really concerned about changing things within the Department of Corrections. And we've had a couple national people on there, and we've had some. It's just an interesting array of people. I really look forward to it every week. I just I'm truly blessed to be able to sit across, just come up with a goofy sort of outline, and then ask questions and let them people pour their heart out. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, I hope it's doing it for a while. I'm actually now we're going to Salt and Light's going to let me do one there too. So I'm doing another one. So we'll be on this show.
Yeah. Great. And how can folks find these backlogged episodes?
If you go to the website, Vincent de Paul ID, and just look on, you'll see the links to the radio program, and you just click the radio links. And I think we've been doing it for 3.5 years. So you'll find just all sorts of people there, national people, Prison Fellowship, James Ackerman's been on there. I've been surprised at who has accepted, and it's been fun to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Thank
still
you
trying to get
for,
those guys. Still trying to get those guys from San Quentin, to
oh,
do that. The guys that you like and that I like.
yeah.
She won't come on, but I'm still after her.
Here's another question along this line. Is there a concerted effort to work with other organizations as a sort of coalition to attack reentry, or does each community organization mostly work independently of each other?
You hit something that was always difficult for me when I got out. It was traditionally the Department of Corrections would recognize their volunteers, and they'd all get together, and it'd be 65 people in the room. We'd all stand up and talk about what we did. And then we'd sit down and we'd never talk to each other. We almost siloed everything. In a perfect world, we'd all work together and we'd all help each other. In some ways, that's why I started IMSI Hope Community. I wanted it to be a Switzerland of offender issues. I wanted not to take a stand on anything. I just wanted it to be there for the dialogue. In some ways, I got to be honest with you, it's a much better than it used to be. There are lots of different people. We interact, we talk to each other. We probably don't talk as much as we potentially should, but I do know that if there's a particular agency that focuses on 12-step groups or those kinds of things, I make sure we refer people there. If it's a clinical kind of aspect that they approach, then they go there. If it's a counseling thing related to, say, sex offending stuff, we report those people there. But what we try to do is still just to be open and to be honest and to share. So I have a tendency that people will come to the office and they'll say, hey, this is what I'm doing. And if it makes sense, then we'll put it in the resource guide and then we'll just kind of go forward and go and try to make it work.
Yeah. All right. Here's another great question. If you were in charge of the Idaho Department of Corrections, what are the 1 or 2 things you would immediately change about the system?
And get me in trouble.
I know that's one of those. Oh, that's a.
I think if I had a magic wand, they're not going to like this. I would do away with the parole commission. I would make the parole commission not a parole commission, a pardons commission, and I would restore good time so that when someone was sent to prison, that they would know when they're going to be released from prison. So if you take me as an example, we have an indeterminate sentencing structure in Idaho. So I was sentenced to 20 years, 7 years fixed. That meant that I could not walk for 7 years before I was eligible for parole. So and I could not see that parole commission until 6.5 years into my prison system. So if you can imagine what that ambiguity does to a family, it just devastates it. If you can imagine what that ambiguity does to a budget, man, parole commission can just say, I don't like the way Anthony parts his hair. You're going to come back and see me in a couple of years. So we're going to add, $25,000 a pop to that. And they have the authority to do that. So if I had a choice, it would be to do away with the parole commission. I think that would be it.
Yeah. Is there anything that your organizations do kind of for preventative, so that families of these incarcerated individuals, they can prevent future generations from following that same route? Is there anything in St. Vincent de Paul that is along those lines?
I think, St. Vincent de Paul, to give them some credit, they have stepped up in terms of reentry more so than many St. Vincent de Paul councils across the country. And they've been brave enough to start talking about these issues and bringing them up. And I'd give them some credit for doing that. The only way things change and the only way things will be better for different generations is if we all understand how the system works and why it works that way. So to come out of the shadows, if you will, and say, Cousin Sally does this and I don't want to talk about it. Let's talk about Cousin Sally and why Cousin Sally is there. And then let's deal with it. Don't hide from it. And so in some ways, that's really what we try to do. So you come into my office and you want to talk about those things, we're more than willing to talk to you about any of those things. Those who know me know that I will go anywhere and it'll be hard for me to shut up as Anthony's figuring out. And we'll just keep talking and keep talking and keep talking. But that's the thing that needs to happen. And I need to develop, we need to develop. And I'm excited about this, that I think this is finally coming to fruition. We need to develop a network of agencies that are excited about getting people to go forward and tell their stories. And there's some good stuff in the works, I can tell you, for next year that potentially that will happen. So I'm excited about that for the first time. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers the question right, but that would be, education would be the key.
Mhm. Yeah, there's another question kind of along these lines. Do you see an attitude change in the community towards people with criminal histories and convictions?
I think it's getting better than it was when I was released myself. But I think that's because more of the numbers are available and more the numbers are being made known. 97% of the people who live south of Boise in the desert will be released and returned to our communities. So let's face that. And you know what? Hey, they're going to be your neighbor. And you know what? There's not going to be too much you can do about it. If they move next door, they're going to move next door. And I will tell you from the standpoint that that could have been a hard experience for them, but you know what? They're probably ready to change their life and come back. And so the more we embrace those people back in the community, the easier it is going to be for everyone involved.
Mhm. Were you ever, while you were incarcerated, did you ever have a job outside? And then were you ever in that system and in that program?
In prison, you mean? When I was in prison?
Yeah.
I did not go to the work in the community. I was at Max, which is kind of the worst of the worst guys. But I was the librarian for 5 years. So it was a great job because here at Max, there's 500 people living there, and I think only 50 people or so can actually walk around. So it's fantastic. And I was in the library that nobody could visit. So you had to request a book, and then I just sent the book out. But I was blessed. I was the librarian. I trained dogs through the IDAPA program. We did Suicide Watch. I was very, very fortunate to be put in that situation, and probably the best scenario that it could be to be incarcerated. Things are a little bit different now, maybe probably a little bit more difficult now, but when I was there, it was a crowded system, but we did well.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, is there anything else that you'd like listeners to know about corrections in Idaho?
No, I think I thank you for letting me do this. Like I said, there's a strong link to what happens down with Anthony, and we've, for a few years now, we've been trying to make this link stronger in terms of the current stuff as opposed to the past stuff, so that we can kind of learn from that. Visiting you and understanding what's going out there is really positive. And so if this kind of tweaks you and you like it, I guarantee you the new stuff that's going on right now is just as exciting, and it needs just as much of your attention, to be very honest with you. And if we can focus on that, then I'm very, very, very hopeful in the future that we can actually really make some changes and beginning next year.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time and your passion, dedication to this.
You and I, we've been going around for a while. We're buddies, so I'm okay. Anything you ask, I'm going to do.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Mark. All right. Well, thank you so much. If anybody has any last questions, I think we went through everything. We answered everything.
And what I would encourage anybody to do, if they want to, if they don't have we didn't get a question answered tonight. In my office, we're open. I'm usually there 9 to 12, Monday through Friday. So just come in and we'll talk, or call me and we'll schedule something and we'll make it work. Okay.
And that's 3217 West Overland Road.
That's it. The new digs.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. And this is the very first captivating conversation of 2021. We'll be back in April, and we'll have another speaker on to highlight some other programs going on. So, all right, Mark, we appreciate your time.
Anthony, thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.